My dear friends, today we are going to discuss about another question from the Kaplan series as related to the embryology. So, a 5-month-old baby is brought to the emergency department by her parents because she is turning blue. She is cyanotic, weak, and dysphonic. Her parents state that she has experienced similar episodes in the past, but never this severe. Physical examination reveals the lungs are clear to auscultation with no wheezings, rales, or ronchi. Cardiac examination reveals a regular rate and rhythm. Normal S1 S2, equate 3, rough systolic murmuring at the left sternal border in the third intercostal space, and a palpable right ventricular lift. Echocardiography demonstrates unusual positioning of the aorta, which override both the left and the right ventricle in the long axis view. In this condition, the primary developmental defect occurs in which portion of the primitive heart? Bulbous cordis, conal septum, right and left horn of the sinus venosus, primitive atria, primitive ventricle. So, if we look deeply, we can understand that there are some points which uh, point toward a congenital anomaly of the heart, that there is a rough systolic murmuring, there is a right ventricular hypertrophy, and there is overriding aorta. So this rough systolic murmuring, it may be due to the stenosis of pulmonary trunk or the interventricular septal defect. So all these conditions we can find in a pathology that is called as the tetralogy of Fallot. So we will go through the development of the heart, then we understand that which structures leads to the formation of tetralogy of Fallot. For that we need to understand something about the development of the heart. So here we have a development of the heart, that initially in the 18th day there is a formation of the area that is called the cardiogenic area, the primitive blood vessels. In 20 day there is a formation of two tubes, and that tube are called the endocardial tubes. Okay, then these two tubes they fuse with each other. There is a formation of fusion of the primitive heart tube. Further development leads to the complete fusion of this tube and formation of swellings into this tube with two superior horns and two inferior horns. The two superior horns they are called as the horn of the truncus arteriosus. They are the horns which give rise to the arches, and the swelling form that is called the bulbous cordis, and the swelling that is the primitive ventricle, and swelling at the down inferior part near the two horns that is called the sinus venosus. Okay, so that is leads to the formation of the primitive atrium. But here we can see that the atria is below the primitive ventricle, but in normal heart the atria are above the ventricle. So it leads to further development and further rotation. So this rotation with the development leads the atria to the upper and the ventricle to the lower side of this developing tube. Still rotation. Finally, we can see that the atrium, the left atrium and the right atrium, it come to the superior side, upper side, while the ventricles come down. And this truncus arteriosus further lead to the development of aorta and pulmonary trunk. So if you want to go deep into the development of the heart, you need to understand that how and what are the factors which leads to rotation, and how the septum are formed, and how the ventricle and the atrium, they are separate from each other. So for that you need to go in detail, you need to understand, you need to know that there are endocardial cushions into the heart, and this endocardial cushion, they start to proliferate, they start to go move toward each other into the formation of a septum that leads to the division of the atria from the ventricle initially. That is, two cavities are formed, and after that there is a formation of the septum primum, septum secundum, which leads to the division of right and left atrium. There is a formation of the muscular and the membranous part of the interventricular septum that leads to the division of the left and the right ventricle from each other. And the endocardial cushions, they normally they are formed or they are the cells of the neural crus cell, which migrate to the heart and help in the development of the heart. But here we will not discuss about all these things, but only we will discuss about the part of the bulbous cordis, and which leads to the formation of the main trunk. For that I have here the bulbous cordis. So this is the tube, this is the superior horn, and this tube. Okay, the whole tube is called as the bulbous cordis. It has the distal part, that is called the truncus arteriosus, the middle part, that is called the cornus cordus, and the proximal part. So what are the structures which form from this tube? So here we can see that the arches are formed above the truncus arteriosus. The truncus arteriosus will give the main branches, great vessels. So it is a tube like this. Okay, so in this tube, with development, there is a rotation, and this rotation into this tube, a septal, okay, the septum between the two tube, for example this is a tube, here is a septum, and this septum is a spiral septum, a spiral rotation of this septum we can say, which leads to the formation of two great vessels which spiral or which is present over each other like a twist, they are twist around each other. That's why in here on the uh, left side we can see the pulmonary trunk, and on the right side we can see the aorta. Rather on the opposite side, here we can see the pulmonary trunk, and on this side, left side, we can see the aorta. It means they are opposite to each other. So it means there is some rotation is occurring here. So that rotation leads to the formation of these two trunk, the aorta and the pulmonary trunk. So this is formed from the truncus arteriosus, while what are formed from the conus cordis, that is the middle portion of the bulbous cordis. So the conus cordis form the outflow tract, this area, and some part of the ventricle. So we can see here easily in this image that this area and this area, the outflow tract, and this area, okay, three areas they are formed from the conus cordis. So conus septum, okay, we can see. So number first area, that is the outflow tract of the pulmonary trunk. Second, there is the outflow tract of the aorta and the initial part of the interventricular septum. So if the development of the conus septum or the conus caudal fail to form, okay, it undergoes some developmental defect, then there is problem into the outflow tract, into the initial part of the outflow tract, that is into the pulmonary trunk initial part, into the initial part of the aorta, and in the septum between the atrium. So in case of tautology of Fallot, we can see here that here, due to that defect leading to the pulmonary valve stenosis, here we can see the overriding of aorta override into the ventricle. Okay, it's present on the both ventricles, and a septum defect here. And due to the stenosis of the pulmonary valve, the pressure into the right atrium increases, which leads to thickening of the right ventricle. So here we can see right ventricular hypertrophy. So all the criteria, all these points are present into our question, that the patient have some sort of murmuring due to this septal defect or due to the gap between the two, and there is dyspnea or some low blood flow to there of the lungs, and there is a right ventricular hypertrophy also, and there is a irregular positioning of the aorta. So all these criteria will make our diagnose proper that this person is suffering from tetralogy of Fallot. So we understand that what is the structural defect in during the embryology which leads to tetralogy of Fallot. That is the conal septum. Rather, the bulbous cordis has 3 parts. Truncus arteriosus also is part. So right and left horn, it leads to some developmental defect into the sinus venorum and some part of the atria. So primitive atrial defect leads to the failure of the formation of the aorta, right and left atrium, while the primitive ventricular defect leads to the defect into the formation of the ventricle. So our answer is the conal septum or the conus cordis.